And good evening and welcome to our exclusive special, Ask the Mayor. I'm Chief Political Correspondent Mark Davis, and joining us here to answer your questions about New Haven and immigration, which is the hot topic, is New Haven Mayor John DeStefano. Mr. Mayor, thanks very much for being with us.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas and many more. And thanks to all of you for all of your great questions. Let's get to our first question from one of our viewers who called in on the Voice of the People hotline.
Yes, I would like the mayor to explain his definition of illegal.
Your definition of illegal?
Well, my definition is if you live in a community, you've got rights and responsibilities to it. What I don't particularly get focused on is federal government that passes immigration laws and then for 20 years doesn't enforce them and creates a problem. I just try to deal with who lives here.
We ought to make a delineation here, because you and I were talking about this just before we came on out of the break. It's that there are thousands, perhaps more than you know, legal non-residents living in the researchers, professors,
Our
doctors.
largest employer is Yale University,
Right.
Yale Med School, Yale New Haven Hospital. We have thousands of immigrants who come here every year, live here, own property, live here for years and years and
right.
years. And in fact, when I've been going out doing my property revaluation meetings, they come up to me and talk
Right.
about taxation without
So
representation.
those folks should be people who own, but there is, as I found out last week, there is a statute on the books that allows people who are here legally from another country, like a doctor or a researcher or what have you at Yale, who owns $1,000 or more in property, to vote on budget issues in their community.
They distinguish by property ownership, and a lot of that has to do with second homes or vacation homes.
Right.
In fact, Andy Rohrabaugh sponsored legislation in 2003 to even broaden that
Republican
that
State
definition.
Senator Andy Rohrabaugh.
So there's been lots of cases where people get to vote in communities in which is not their principal residence,
Right.
or get to vote in Maryland in communities and not be citizens.
But your proposal would include the legal ones and the illegal ones.
Short answer, yes, but to this point. And this point is New Haven is largely a transient community. A lot of people coming and going, a lot of rental housing. And so for us, it's just a matter of how do you engage people in the community, make them feel part of ownership of the community. And one way to do it is have a say in who runs the community and what your budget is and things like that.
Right.
That affects different people in different fashions.
All right, let's get back to the viewer questions. This is from Wayne in Brantford, and this is one that many people asked. Quote, I would like to know, Mr. Mayor, why you didn't bring up this idea. Oh, I guess this one is also on the Voice of the People. All right, let's hear what he had to say.
I would like to know, Mr. Mayor, why you didn't bring up this idea prior to the election, because I think the backlash may have had a different effect than what actually happened.
Yeah, this guy read my mind because I wanted to ask that question. That's why I started reading it. Why didn't you bring it up before the election?
For no reason. This was brought up in a conversation with a reporter last week on an entirely different matter. But it's for the same reason that people say, well, you're doing this to get immigrant votes to vote for you. And I'm saying, well, I don't think it quite works that way, that it happens that way. So the timing didn't have to do with anything. I don't think it works politically for or against anybody. And again, I drive it back to this point, which is, if you live in New Haven and you're paying taxes in New Haven and you're doing right things, and we've got this community where Lord knows we have some challenges, it's just better to have everybody engaged and participating in community. And I don't think this is a thing that gets settled in a month or necessarily a year. So I think people get plenty of opportunities to have discussion about this during election cycles.
Let me follow up on this gentleman's question, because this begs the question. This is a population estimated at what, several thousand in New Haven, the illegal residents. Several thousand?
I would guess over 10,000.
10,000?
Hartford and Bridgeport, too?
Yeah. What makes you think people who are living under the radar, know they're illegal, living in fear, would parade down to a city hall and a registrar's office and say, here I am, I want to register to vote?
I don't think they're living under the radar screen. I think they're in the restaurants and businesses you see each and every day.
Well, sure, working in
think
service
they're-
jobs, sure. You can't be under the radar there.
Not just service jobs, too. And I think their kids are going to school, and they're United States citizens. I think they're all around us. And again, I think the issue here is the federal government for years and years has permitted this problem to develop to the extent where you have immigrants who came here legally on a visa, they overstayed their visa, they're working, they have kids here, they're part of our economy. And so I think these are folks, I mean, if you look at some of the challenges I have in crime in New Haven and some other things, these are typically not the folks who are part of the issue. And I'll just say one other thing. I think it'd be smart for America to broadly increase immigration quotas, particularly for highly educated, well-trained individuals, for the reason that I said earlier, that we see them come to places like Yale and add a lot of value to our community and to our nation.
Okay, let's go to our next question. This was submitted through WTNH.com by Jeanette in Milford. She asks, in your opinion, what gives the illegal immigrants the right to vote? I mean, we have covered some of that already, but...
Well, first of all, I'm not asking they vote in Milford. I'm not suggesting they vote in national elections. And I'm not asking for anything different than your point about property owners. What is somebody who's a property owner in a community? Right. Frankly, if you're a member of the community, documented or undocumented, we urge you to get a tax ID number because, as you know, why Homeland Security may be concerned about undocumented, IRS doesn't care and will be glad to give you a tax ID number so you can pay taxes. So to me, the point is, if you're living in a place and you're following the rules and you're working hard.
But that's if I can stop you right there.
It seems to me, no, well, let me finish.
People feel they're not following the rules,
and you're doing all those things, it seems to me that you should have a say in what goes on in your community. And as far as people following the rules, I have lots of people who are citizens who don't follow the rules in New Haven, that's for sure, and all over the state of Connecticut. So I'm not trying to validate their presence here. That's, again, up to the federal government to do eventually. Point is, in a very diverse community, lots of different kinds of people, highly transient, lots of rental units. I just think it makes sense for people to know who their neighbors are, to be engaged, and not only to enjoy rights, but to have responsibilities to get involved. And I frankly think voting is one of them. And I wish more of the folks who are already here and on the voter rolls would vote.
All right, let's go to another question. This is a comment from John in Bridgeport. This was recorded on our Voice of the People hotline. John?
I feel that it's not good to give illegals the right to vote when you had men and women dying in Afghanistan and Iraq. As a Vietnam vet, I feel that these illegals shouldn't have the same rights I have when I fought for this country. It just ain't right.
All right, there was another veteran who also submitted a similar question to us on WTNH.com. Chris from Seymour asks, do you have a personal vendetta against the U.S. military? Why should illegals have the right to vote? I'm a U.S. Army soldier that fought to protect our rights. Should I just lay down my rifle?
No, I think they've got a good point, but I think they also need to recognize that there's no requirement to be a citizen to join the armed forces at the same time. I mean, America is this idea of accepting responsibility for yourself, for each other. I think being open and accepting. And I think what has served this country well over the years is when we've recognized that robust immigration policies make sense, but irrespective even again, because I don't think anytime soon the federal government is going to solve this challenge, let alone payroll tax and lots of other things they're trying to deal with. We're in New Haven trying to do what makes sense for our community to grow. The fact is we have a huge and significant immigrant population, some documented, some undocumented. We have refugees here. Mark, hundreds and hundreds of refugees here. And it's just how we get us all on the same page of working together. And I think that the issue for us is to engage people. Who are they? Where do you live? What are you doing? Be part of community.
All right, let's go to another question. I think we can squeeze another one in this segment. This question comes from Phyllis. Let's listen.
I don't understand how he can do that, and when people have felonies, they cannot vote. So I think he needs to reconsider that. There's people that's been here for years and that's got a felony, and I'm quite sure that some of them illegal immigrants have felonies. So I don't think that should be a fair choice for the people that should have been here.
You know, to her point, I have 5,000 people on probation, parole, or some form of early release. We do not have a small reentry population.
Right.
And in fact, those with felonies can't have their voting rights restored and do. And you could actually be on probation, and as long as you're complying with the rules, you get to vote. And we encourage them to, just as we encourage them to work, change their ways, and accept responsibilities for themselves. So I think the standard is actually pretty uniform, that if you're here, you're a member of the community, engage, go to church, be responsible for kids in the neighborhood, be responsible for yourself, and that's the larger message here.
And you think if they're given the opportunity to vote in municipal elections, you're talking about Board of Aldermen and mayor and bonding issues and things like that. That's what you're talking about, right?
Local elections, that's pretty much what we have. But here's the point. When we did the resident...
Probate judge, I think. And that's
When we had the resident ID card back in 2007, let's say, where we said to people, if you're here, we want to know you're here. We want to know who you are. We want to engage you. How do you do effective community policing programs if we don't know who's here and if we don't have a system where people want to talk to our police? So whether it's ex-felons, whether it's new immigrants, whether it's old immigrants, whether it's citizens who've been here forever, I just think the community is served by being open, welcoming, and realistic about who's here. Again, none of us calling in, you or I, created the system. We're managing it.
All right, we need to take a break. When we come back, we'll have more of your questions for Mayor John DeStefano here on News 8. Stay with us. And welcome back. This is a special edition of Ask the Mayor. I'm Chief Political Correspondent Mark Davis. The Mayor, of course, is Mayor John DeStefano. We're going to switch gears just a little bit now and talk about the Federal Secure Communities Program, which you have been speaking out against, and where this all started last week at an event. We have a question here from Joe in Meriden.
I find it curious that Mr. DeStefano refuses to run a secondary check on people who are arrested, who obviously broke the law, to check their alien citizenship, or their citizenship. While a young 18-year-old girl in Monroe just got deported because she's been applying for green cards and got denied, so they knew where to get her. I find it curious that people who commit crimes are better than young college students who are trying to do the right thing.
All right, well, can you reconcile what this fellow's asking?
I can't reconcile Monroe because I don't know about Monroe, but I'll tell you what our general order in the police department is. If you're arrested, a background is we do know who you are, and we check.
Right, that's normal.
So that's normal, and we do report to the FBI. And if something comes back that says there's a warrant outstanding, that's going to be honored. The issue here is secure communities is something where the FBI sends those fingerprints to Homeland Security, and what's been happening is Homeland Security does not have the best database in the world. So largely what they've been doing is asking to hold without warrant people who have no other conviction or arrest record. Certainly if you're on the FBI terrorist watch list, if you're got something on you for a serious crime,
that comes
you
up.
should, yeah, that comes up, and we think you should be detained. But
that's why that was done. I mean, that's the most important thing, is it
right,
not?
but that's not what's happening. What they're doing is they're detaining U.S. citizens, and they are detaining the vast majority of people have no criminal history with the government, local or state. And in fact, we saw that in the immigration control raids in New Haven in 2007. I think they arrested 31 people, took them away to camps all over the Northeast, and the fact was only one was ever held. All the rest were released. Now, fine, they do that. Our issue is if we're going to promote a safe community, an important part of that is having relationships between the police and citizens.
Right.
And
this ruins this.
And what this
right?
does is if you think you're going to be deported, you're not going to report that you've been robbed. You're not going to report, if you're a woman, that your boyfriend is beating you up because you're afraid of that. And it doesn't begin to address the side issue that the federal government has created, is that they were arresting in New Haven families where the kids were U.S. citizens and literally pulling the parents out and leaving the children behind. Now, he didn't create the question. The caller didn't create that problem. I didn't. You didn't create it. But it's the kind of thing that we're dealing with here at a time when a significant part of our population is undocumented.
Right. Well, to put it in the vernacular, if you as the city of New Haven have to rat on these people, they're going to be afraid to cooperate with the police. Is that
and
right?
in point of fact, mayors of virtually every major city across the United States, the governors of New York and Massachusetts agree with this program. Secure Communities doesn't work. And so it needs to work at a level that if you're a serious offender, if you're a potential threat to the United States, you absolutely should be detained. No argument about that. But in practice, that's not what's happening.
We have time in this segment, I think, for one more question. Let's see. This is from Sandra in Waterbury. Came to us on WTNH.com. Why are you worrying about illegal immigrants voting when young people are being murdered on a daily basis in your city? Don't you think the situation requires immediate attention? Why do you turn a blind eye to crime in your city? And I'm going to tell you, I wasn't in town today for 5 minutes when someone stopped me right down the street here near the Green and told me that they were upset about this voting issue, but also that they had been on the Green one day and someone was being harassed and there wasn't any police in sight anywhere.
Right. You know, and frankly, public safety is a big concern. What caught the media's attention and the public's attention was an immigration issue, which is why we're talking about it. But you'll also know that 2 weeks ago, Keith Kuntz, your anchor, was part of a live-streamed event with a guy by the name of David Kennedy and a whole bunch of community activists around what we can do to reduce violence in the city, and it deserves a lot of attention. I spent far more time dealing with public safety in the city and budgets and taxes than this does. This captures people's attention. But go back to this. It's important to keep in mind what this is. This is not young people. The average homicide victim this year was over 27 years old. It's largely a re-entry population issue. 80% of the victims and perpetrators tend to be folks coming back into the community. And as part of bringing Chief Esserman in with a rededication to community policing, which for us means connections between community and the police, therefore this connection with the immigrant population, which is a part of the population of New Haven, it is a central focus for us. So this is not a matter of not doing this or that. I was out 4 nights last week explaining property revaluation in the city. I'm going to be out tomorrow night and Wednesday night doing that again, because people care a great deal about that. So it gets a lot of attention, and it's a fair concern.
We have to take another break. We'll have a check on the forecast and more of your questions coming up for Mayor John DeStefano. Stay with us. Okay, we're back. I'm Chief Political Correspondent Mark Davis. Yes, live in New Haven tonight with His Honor, Mayor John DeStefano. We're going to go back to your questions now. This is a question from Chris in West Haven concerning the DREAM Act.
I had to pay tuition for my daughter for 8 years, and he wants to give free tuition to these people that got in the country illegally. No way. He should be impeached.
Let me correct something. A lot of people misunderstand this. The so-called DREAM Act allows the children of illegals to pay the same as legal residents. It's not free tuition. It's the in-state rate.
Well, in point of fact, in New Haven, we operate the state's largest inter-district magnet system. I have 3,000 kids coming from suburban communities to attend New Haven public schools all the time. I think the point is, I expect everyone to pay their taxes. And that's why, irregardless of your immigration status, we ask you and expect folks to get tax ID numbers from the Internal Revenue Service. They'll be glad to give them to you, irregardless of what your immigration status is, and you should pay taxes, and you should accept responsibility if you're enjoying the benefits of the community for doing that. That also said, again, one of the ironies of the system is that many of these kids are United States citizens, children here, or some siblings are, and some are not. And again, until the federal government solves this problem, we're left with trying to make do.
All right, we'll come back, and I think we'll have time for one or more of your questions for Mayor John DeStefano. Stay with us. Okay, welcome back to Ask the Mayor. Let's get to this final question. This is from Joe in New Haven. This was submitted through WTNH.com. Joe says, I have seen my birthplace that I have lived and worked in for 30 years become kidnapped by you and made into your perverse playground of freebies for illegal, non-tax-paying aliens. Why not the same ferocity in protecting taxpayers you must serve? I'm sure you disagree with that non-tax-paying part.
I think people are feeling economically squeezed and worried about the future, and I understand that. I would also remind them when my grandparents came here and have much more robust period of permitting immigrants to come here, 1 out of every 2 people who lived in New Haven was a immigrant. And those were
all 4 of my grandparents were immigrants.
And people say, well, they came here legally. Well, there were no restrictions on immigration back on those days unless you were Asian, in point of fact. Restrictions didn't occur till after the First World War. And I think they're a big part of the economy of New Haven and of Connecticut and of the United States. And it's not just low-wage workers. The values that are being created out of the university by immigrants and knowledge-based companies is huge and dramatic. And so as well the service companies as well in the city. And so I think there's a place where we all benefit by solving this problem nationally about immigration, but also about just engaging people in the community, which is at the end of the day all this is.
Was this just a, quickly, we only have a few seconds here, was this just a trial balloon? Did you just toss this out to see
No,
what
we've been
reactions?
talking about it for months and months
You have
about
been.
submitting something in the legislative session for next year.
And you saw my
And in the
report Friday,
context-
you're not going to have a prayer up there.
Well, you know, Mark, things start somewhere. Things start somewhere, and having a discussion about how you build healthy communities to me never hurts.
All right. Thanks very much for being with us. Merry
Buddy,
Christmas,
good
Happy
seeing
New
you.
Year, many more. Thanks for
bet.
being with us. I want to thank you for joining, and I want to thank you for all of your questions, both at WTNH.com and on our telephones as well. And don't miss our next installment of Ask the Governor on January 4th at 5:30. I'll sit down with Governor Daniel Malloy and ask your questions. You can submit those questions for the governor two ways: through our Voice of the People hotline at 203-212-WTNH or online at WTNH.com. Now to Keith and Ann for the news at 6.